All right. So, if you're watching this, you are probably interested in writing a LARP, specifically a freeform. Now, get 5 nerds in a room and ask them a question about definitions, and you'll get 20 different answers and a dissertation at the end of it. So I'm going to ask the panel to kick things off. What is a freeform, specifically in the context of Australian LARP?
I'll start with that. Look, I've been very insistent in a few discussions recently that in reality, a freeform is whatever an Australian convention right of wrangler says is a freeform. Historically, conventions divided games into a few different categories, mostly tabletop versus freeform, where freeform was anything that looked a bit LARP-like. So it's really anything that looks more like a LARP than it does like a tabletop, historically. But because it's come from a convention context, the things that were classified that way picked up certain characteristics. They had to be runnable in a short time frame, sometimes 6 hours. I think there were a few 9-hour ones, but usually 3 hours. They had to be able to work in a limited space, often a classroom or a double classroom or a hall a bit bigger. They had to have they usually had pre-generated characters because you couldn't afford the time to run a workshop to help people create characters for your game. It had to be self-contained. So most of our characteristics stem from the history there and the environment in which they're run.
I think the only thing I would add is the vast majority of them are social based, because otherwise you're adding a lot of additional GM support to handle all the things that are outside of the social box. So the vast majority of cases, all the information you need is already in the game. Someone else has it. You don't need to necessarily go to a GM for this outside bit of information. But yes, otherwise I'll definitely agree with that.
They're pretty universally non-combat as well, mostly because convention insurance would not cover combat LARP.
True.
How do they compare to other forms of LARP?
How do you mean, Will?
You've got all kinds of different LARPs out there. You've got combat LARP. You've got LARPs that take over a weekend, festival LARPs. What makes a freeform unique? What are some of the Travis mentioned a couple of the key parts of elements of a freeform, but what makes them unique?
They're often run multiple times as well.
There's typically an awful lot of effort that goes into writing a convention freeform, so people want to pull them out and run them again if they can. Don't waste the effort.
Well, to be specific and build on that, the written character sheets, right? As far as I have experienced, those are mainly a hallmark of freeforms compared to, Swordcraft doesn't give you a written character sheet, as an example. So that pre-written element, and to tie it again back into that sense of artistic history. So it's responsive to an artistic tradition, I feel, because there's a lot of people doing the same things, but they don't necessarily call their games freeforms, right? Because those people running those games aren't necessarily responding to the same tradition, haven't participated in other games and had discussions with other people in that space. That's something that comes to mind, possibly.
Yeah, another difference that I'm aware of is that typically they're either low or no mechanics. And a lot of cases, if there are mechanics, the players don't need to know that. The people running the game know what mechanics they're using. The players just go, I want to do this. The storyteller goes, okay, the end result is this. Done. So it is a lot less work for the player to understand before they begin. And also as part of that, there tends to be a lot more theatrical combat, not combat. So yeah, you two are going to have a fight. Okay, you're much better. Go for it. Done.
Very descriptive. Yeah, in that sort of space, people are asked to describe what they are doing in a physicality sense, when it comes to combat, and describing what their character would be doing. Also, again, the history of it comes from would lean itself to, you don't necessarily, while costuming is appreciated and wonderful to see in a room, the immersion is in the mind, not in the set dressing, and it doesn't require people to come fully kitted out in authentic TM costuming, and we generally don't require that because we do have this convention sense where people are running from 3-hour block to 3-hour block to 3-hour block. You put 4 things back to back, and there's effort in getting and money involved in having costuming for of great detail. So it lends itself to being open to people who maybe don't have the ability, the budget, the aesthetic, the design, the capability to create, build, make, buy costuming in that context as well.
Most people don't want to spend $200 or $500 on a costume for a 3-hour game that they play once.
Yeah.
Costuming, if it's there, has just been pulled out of someone's closet.
So when it comes to writing a freeform, what settings, concepts, and plots do you think work well, and what don't work so well?
I think the most important thing you have to do is define box, because these people are going to be in this thing for 2.5 hours of active play. You have to kind of come up with a good reason as to why they're not leaving. So that's why a lot of games are around social occasions. It's a wedding, it's a funeral, it's peace talks. There is a reason for these characters to be in this room and not leave. So you wouldn't really have an adventuring based game, because that would involve a lot of going out, and there's a lot of ST time required for handling the going out bits. So you might have the pre-adventuring, we're at the Adventurers Guild trying to work out what we're doing. That might be your game, but you wouldn't have the adventuring side of it from that. So first things first, find your box. Is it a wedding? Is it a funeral? Is it a birthday party? Is it a wedding anniversary? What is it?
And think of your box in terms of time as well as space, not just what is keeping people here, but what starts your event, what finishes the event.
There's also what is more familiar to people, based on the other media that they watch or other games that they play. Fee has often said to me that court games are some of the easier ones to get right, or harder ones to get wrong, because a lot of people have pre-built expectations of what it is to be in some kind of court of a monarch, and what how that should work. Yeah. I'm trying to think of other examples, but that's
Some of my best games have been real in a real world setting, and I've leveraged what people already know about the lives that they're living to help them get into that play space. So yeah, familiarity is it helps. And you can do things with settings that people already know. Vampire the Masquerade has spawned any number of LARPs in any number of formats, and a lot of people know it. So you can leverage their knowledge of setting there, and you have less to explain. But I've had a fair bit of success with games that are more real world.
I'd say you don't necessarily have to know where a game is ending, because that is something that you can have the players determine, which is you have to know what sort of endings are possible. I think is a key element there. Know the types of endings that you're going to get. Things that don't work well, Nordic LARP murder mysteries. How do you define whodunit in a game where everyone can put their hand up and say they did it? When you don't have parameters, there are things you need parameters around. And in a murder mystery, one of them is defining who did it. So if there's a question around that sort of aspect of a game, you need a parameter, you need a guilty party, you need the person or group of people who are responsible for the thing. That is how you can control the story and the narrative in that context. So yeah, I'm going to go with Nordic LARP murder mysteries don't really work.
That's an interesting point to raise. One of Melbourne's most prominent Freeform series is called the Black Death the Black Death Murder Mysteries. The first one was written as a response to a number of mystery LARPs that the writers had played, and these other LARPs these other freeforms had kept trying to have no murder at all in a murder mystery, or everybody wanted to murder them, or everybody did murder them. A lot of trying to subvert the expectations of the mystery genre, and not have everything hinge on one player who did it, and whether people could figure out who did it. And the writers of the Black Deaths played a number of these and said, this isn't working for us. These are not producing really good games. So they sat down and wrote the Black Death, the first one. And their objective was to write a murder mystery with a real murderer who could be caught. The clues were in the game. If you talk to the right people and exchange the right information, you could figure it out, and you could catch the murderer, or you might not. Doesn't always work out. And it worked so well that they wrote another and another, and they just kept going. There were quite a few of these written. So there's something
a big part of it is
does.
Yeah, understanding the conventions of whatever style of game you're running. Like a murder mystery, if you don't have a murderer, that's lying to the players in a way that's not necessarily fun. So understanding the conventions of whatever you're doing, and building your game accordingly. I think one of the things I point out to people who are unsure of the concept is a tabletop is 5 players, and the GM takes on the role of everything else. The GM is the outside world. So we want to go over there. Cool. We go over there, and here's what you find. In a freeform, you can't do that because you've got 20 players. You may have 4 GMs, but they're not going to be able to spin off this group of people going over there, and this group of people going over there, and this group of people going over there. That's hard to manage in that sort of environment. So the vast majority of everything you need is already in the game. Tabletop, you're going off to find the fabled amulet to save the kingdom. In the freeform, someone in the game already has the amulet. You just need to work out what they need for you to get it. That's the main difference. Is the more that's internal to the freeform, the less work the GMs have to do, and the better they're able to handle that. So you need to make sure you have a situation that fits that box properly.
So I've talked to a bunch of people, and they're keen to write a freeform, but the first stumbling block they've come to is where to come up with an idea. So I'll ask the panel, where do you get your ideas from? What gives you that spark of inspiration that makes you want to write a freeform? And what ideas have
Everywhere and everything.
a little bit more narrow? What has the juice? What, like, when you go, all right, that sounds like a great idea to get 15 to 20 people in a room and chatting to each other?
I've done one based on the Labyrinth movie. One scene in that made my brain go, hang on, that's a scene from a role-playing game. I better write that game.
It's a hard question for me to answer because I haven't had enough inspiration to write one in over a decade now.
Well, I would say it's a combination of the things that you find fun that have been inspiring you in terms of, you've just read a really good book, you're excited about it, you want to talk to people about it. You saw another game and you're like, hey, this would be really fun if it was a free, like a tabletop, and going, hey, what if this was a freeform? But the other factor being what's happening in the scene right now that people would think is like interesting or relevant based on what's not being done or what people want to see done. So you can always like talk to other people and say like, hey, what kind of games do you miss playing? Let's just have a one shot about it and have some fun.
A lot of times mine are based around one very simple question. What's gone wrong? We have a social situation, something's gone wrong, cool, we've got a game, we can make a game out of that. Because if things are going properly, that's exciting for the people involved, but that's not exciting for the players. We are at this situation, this thing has gone wrong, cool, now you've got something to play with, go for it. So my most recent game was a wedding that should have happened that, oh no, the bride and groom have just disappeared, what's going on? Something has just gone wrong, that sort of thing.
I have done a game that was essentially inspired by playing one of Fee's games. Well, Fee and Sarah Weston ran a game, and I basically said, I want to do that, but Greek myth based. And then teamed up with Sarah, who wrote the inspirational game, to write that. I wrote a game about homeless people, which was inspired by a newspaper article that I read when I visited Brisbane, which told me how many people die of exposure on the streets of Brisbane every year. And that was a hard thing to look at. And I said, more people should know about this. So I wrote a game about it. My most recent game, I attended a circus show and came out of it saying, ooh, I could kill a trapeze artist. It's a murder mystery.
To answer the question that's been put in chat, you need to make sure there's enough to keep people talking. The biggest thing.
Before we do that, can we circle back to what Fee was going to say?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, Fee and I kind of started talking at the same time.
Political situations are fantastic inspiration. Looking at the sorts of games that are being run and seeing what's missing is something that is also really important. Something that you as a person have passion about as well. What is something that you personally know, understand, feel passionate about, and want to get in front of? Much like Travis's comment with homeless people and deaths via exposure in Australia, and particularly Brisbane, you know, that's not something people think about a lot. You go, oh, Brisbane, it's pretty mild, people won't die. But yeah,
It's that many in Brisbane. How many in Melbourne?
Exactly. Yeah, those sorts of things. You know, for me, it's writing stuff about this country that we live in and the political situation and the cultural and spiritual situation of this place, because we were not seeing games that were run specific to Australia. Everyone would take their mythologies from America, from and specifically the United States regions, our Asia, parts of Asia, and particularly Japan, or from Europe and specifically Britain, Great Britain, were where a lot of game inspirations came from. So, you know, there's an element there that's possibly not educational based, and also cultural cringe. So what are those inspirations that are in that domain for bringing Australian stories as an Australian game form, the freeform being, you know, one of these things that Australian game convention scene can lay good, solid. We were one of the first to do this sort of thing. And yet we're not telling Australian stories in the whole. So and that's something we're familiar with. So taking some inspiration out of your own life, taking inspiration out of what you're passionate about, what you find fun, because not every freeform needs to have a message. I'm going to say that right there. Not every freeform needs to have a message, but every freeform needs to have something that is interesting and entertaining for the players who are going to go and participate in your writing, in your world, in your story.
But also make sure that you're fairly passionate about it, because it takes a lot of work to write a good freeform.
Oh yeah.
And if you don't have the passion to get you through the work, to get it all down on paper and get it in front of your players, you could spend weeks or months of your life working on it and then abandon it and never have anything to show for it. So make sure that you are passionate about it.
So there's been a you go random.
Put it in perspective. My biggest one, I think, would have been unions and intersections. It was almost 100,000 words written in character sheets. So there's a lot of work there. So you've got to make sure there is enough for the players to support the work you do.
So we've had a question in the chat that wants to extend a bit on the idea. How do you distinguish which ideas have enough heft to them to be developed into a full game? What does that fully formed idea look like? What elements does it need?
They don't. Whatever idea you have, it does not have enough to fill a full game. These games, you start with the core of an idea, but you're going to have to add elements. You're going to have to add other ideas. You're going to have to expound on themes. It is not going to be one idea that carries your game.
Rhydian?
Sorry.
I do actually think that there's some ideas that will stand out more than others for most people, or for some people. You know, you can't take the approach of I'm going to make this work no matter what. But something I would think about is what are the villains doing? Like what's the conflict, and are there villains in this story? Because if your story rests on one person being a villain for everybody else, that could be a tough role to play. And the games I have seen, the things that develop better seem to be ones that have multiple potential antagonists, or ways in which things could end. And yeah, you can develop that, but if you start with an idea that's just that's why I know that meta mysteries are a really popular genre, but I don't really want to touch them as much myself, because yeah, I just think it's a tough role to play, and you've got to think about what's fun. Yeah, so you want the antagonistic type of roles to have really meat on those bones that you think is interesting, that you would be willing to play if nobody else was.
Alright.
If you're looking at that sort of game, you probably want to have multiple quote unquote antagonists, because the person who this character doesn't like and is currently fighting against is best friends of this character. So they're not antagonists, but these two are, and you've got to have enough friction in multiple directions so that if this character isn't being played by a strong player, it's not going to cause the game to flop. Because as I said, murder mysteries mean there is one person who is the main antagonist, and if that person's not very good at it, that's not going to be a very strong game for everyone else. So you've got to make sure there's enough strength in multiple positions so that multiple games are running at the same time. They all just happen to be in the same room.
Coming back to the ideas element, yeah, I'm going to reiterate what Travis said. It is more than one idea. You have an idea that sparks what the game starts out as, what your planning starts out as. But as you add layers in, as you add characters in, think about what they are doing in the game as well. What is the role that those characters are fulfilling? What other elements are linked to your initial idea? So I'm gonna think of something here. If you are setting up a game in a I'm going to go right back to some of my old school stuff. If you're setting up a game in a tavern, great, that's a really fun idea, because a lot of people can have a lot of different stories coming into that space. There's multiple opportunities for intersectional stories that happen in a tavern space, and you can go, I want a game in a tavern. Sure, that's the simple version. On top of that, you have secret handovers of with spies. You have missing heiresses. You have strange artifacts that are being hunted down. You have sold. You have trade deals that are going on. You have all of these other things that you add into that, and making sure that the game is multi-layered for the characters to be involved in.
So once we have an idea locked in, or at least the spark of, I want to write a freeform. Oh yeah, sorry, I missed that.
That's okay. But yeah, before you just jump off, I want to add for posterity, for anyone listening to this later, I think it's worth saying that I am the youngest and least experienced freeform writer in this group. So listen to the others first. And and it's probably something that shapes the different perspectives here, being that as a younger and fresher writer, the first thing I'm looking for is an idea that feels easier to me. Whereas all of these lovely experienced people, they have the experience to be able to go, anything can be made to work. Yeah.
Not quite anything.
Not anything.
I've had a couple failures, so no, not everything can work. It's fine.
So when you've got that idea locked in, what is the first step you take in the planning process? How you've got your Word document open and there's maybe a title there, and then what do you do next?
Personally, when I'm writing, the first thing I do is work out who are the core characters for the core story. What's their interaction? Because that then builds the start of my framework for everyone else to put on. Okay, so the reason we're here is because political negotiations. Okay, which means I need someone from this kingdom, I need someone from this kingdom, I need someone from this kingdom, I need each of those three are going to have assistants. Okay, so there's 6 people. This other guy is going to be there to screw things over, so he's number 7. But I can't just have him on his own. I have to have reasons for him to be there other than that, and that's where I build. I need to work out what is the core that's going to allow me to add things to. And when I'm writing, I typically write character by character. I'll start with this character. Okay, this is who they are basically. They need to interact with this character. I'll write them. I'll hang on, I have to change something in the first character as a result, and I'll build on that way when I'm writing.
Lists, lots of lists.
Oh yeah, lots of lists.
Lists of characters, lists of plots. Finding all the elements that are going to eventually go into the game. Writing a character sheet isn't the first thing you do. I'm sure it's going to vary by writer and groups of writer. But yeah, there will be things that come before that. And for me, it tends to be lists of something.
I will generally try and talk to people and run through ideas and bounce ideas off people that I write with, work with, whatever, because that way I'm starting to flesh out logical consistency within whatever game world I'm running. So conversations and understanding going back to those first principles of understanding the box that you're going to be operating in, understanding the story that you're going to be telling. Does it make sense? Does it who comes up with roles? What are some of these roles? What might they look like? Is my thinking solid enough to continue down this line? Then I move into list spreadsheets. I love an Excel spreadsheet with doing the cross list of characters' names across the top and down the side, and who's interacting with what in what plot. You know, that's a really fun and interesting, because that way when you're plotting it out, that as your second or third iteration, you can start to see characters that have maybe a little light on with things to talk about for 3 hours. Making sure that you're aware that plots, who is proactive in a plot versus who is the subject of a plot, and making sure that there's enough meat for characters there. But yeah, going back, definitely talking to people, talking to, someone, particularly if I'm going to have a co-GM or a co-writer, making sure that we talk about it and talk through it.
On that topic, actually, are there any programs or like old school methods of plotting out your planning process? I know I've had a lot of success using Miro, but are there any tools that you would recommend new GMs?
Big piece of paper.
Yeah.
A bigger piece of paper with butcher paper, but
Yep.
like in big markets. I also use Obsidian, but let other people talk before I.
I think now that's my really old school tool. It's just a big piece of paper and some pens.
I'm finding nowadays flowcharting is kind of useful, especially when you're working out plots of this person and this person are interacting in this plot, this person and this person are interacting in this plot, so on and so forth, allowing you to get that map of what connections are what to make sure that it's not too heavy for one person or too light for another. Yeah, a piece of paper, writing everything down. There's no one right way to do this because you're getting information on paper. That's the important part.
But I can show people Obsidian if people haven't heard of it, because it's a pretty fantastic program that is free to use.
That'd be great.
Let's see. Yeah, okay. Here we go. This should work. Share screen. Yeah, so this is the program that I use for that I used for my rewrite of Pride and Extreme Prejudice. So like you make all these files of all the character names, and when you've added links in the sheets that show basically who they're connected to, I basically add hyperlinks, and it creates this beautiful little graph where you can get a look at who's connected to whom, and that's super handy because you want to be able to see if some characters are less connected than others, because that's the character that needs the most help usually. You know, because these connections define their game experience and how much they have to work with in creating their story. Yeah, so if there's somebody who's only got a few, this character down the bottom here only has 4 connections and actually got cut from my rewrite. So yeah, super handy tool, and you can create all kinds of flowcharts with it. Yeah, it's I still love the classic piece of paper option, but that's a really good one for when you're ready to move to the next stage of developing ideas more completely.
You've convinced me. I haven't seen that before, and if I do start writing something, I'm going to use it.
Yep, same here. I'm definitely going to have a look at that one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Fee, Gavin's just posted in the chat, might be worth pulling up an example of the character relationship spreadsheet, like the one that was used for the mine, just so people can visualize it.
Thanks. Okay, let's see if I can find that and where it. Yeah, I know where it is. Just give me a sec. Yeah.
While you do that, I might just add a bit of extra question for the paper writing enjoyers. How do you what do you draw on the piece of paper? Is it just sort of character ideas and then like linking them together? What do you format it like?
Yeah, mind map. Sorry,
Mind
Travis,
map.
you go.
I think some of the most significant ones have basically had names of characters on them, not necessarily final names. A lot of characters get working names early on just to have a label for them, but a lot of these will have just names plonked somewhere on the paper and a bunch of arrows, often in different colours, going from one character to another, mapping out the plots as we come up with them. And random scribbled notes and additional plots jotted at the side, and it can get pretty chaotic because it's just whatever's in your head goes onto the paper.
I see Steve in the chat has said that they use key item index cards so they can move stuff around and see where holes might appear. That seems very helpful because imagine on a piece of paper rubbing out a connection if you've removed a character would add a lot of extra mess to it.
Yeah, I mean I've mostly used that sort of thing for early drafts, and you know the paper might go through a couple of iterations and then it'll get thrown out.
Awesome, Fee. This is a very colorful looking spreadsheet. Can you run us through this?
Yeah. So the different colors relate to the relationships that we had between our 25 different characters for this game. Red is hostile, the orange were rivals, pink is known, yellow is unknown, green is ally, blue is colleague, purple is family, and black, of course, is themselves. And down the side, we had them divided out into the lighter colors of which group these characters were in. So, yeah, that is this was something that, yeah, Gav and I worked on multiple times. It changed a little bit as we were during the writing process, as we're discovering different characters have had different links or needed to have different links with some of the characters that we'd initially set up. So yeah, big fun stuff. And that's that's one way of doing it for sure.
Awesome. When it comes to the actual writing of, you've started your planning, you've got it all prepped out. What actually takes the majority of your time in the writing process?
Yeah, sorry, Gav's also written in there that the relationships are asymmetric, potentially, which is also really, somebody might think, oh, this person and I get on really well. They don't. So it's able to show that in a visual form while we're writing. Thanks, Gav. Sorry, I've interrupted your question.
No, it's all good. Yeah, what takes up most of the time? We've heard 100,000 words being jotted down. Where is the bulk of the writing happening?
My answers are starting to sound really reductive here, because my answer is literally the writing takes up the majority.
Yeah, agreed.
You will spend, when you're writing a freeform, especially if you're writing with a team or a partner, you'll spend a fair bit of time in the early stages hashing things out. Getting a basic outline and getting your basic idea in common between yourselves. But at some stage, you're going to transition into writing, and freeform writing is a form of writing. It's the same as novel writing or short story writing or poetry or whatever. And the most important thing that you need to do if you're a writer is to write. You will need to sit down and put your ideas into paper or onto paper in a way that conveys what needs to be conveyed to the player. And that, I find that is a long, slow process. And I might only get through a third of a character sheet in a night. So if I'm writing alone, it can be months of writing before I'm done.
So my writing process, I think, sounds a bit different from yours, Travis. I actually find the first draft to be a quicker part of the writing compared to, I think the bulk of the writing for me exists in the second draft and the edit process. And something I learned from like other forms of writing, like thesis writing and creative writing, is it's not a second draft if you are still just editing the first. Like you can edit that first write-up as much as you want, but it's still a first draft unless you have gone to a new piece of paper and started writing it from scratch again. And sometimes doing that, you're looking at the old one, that you've got these two side by side, and it might turn out exactly the same. But that second draft process for me takes longer, because as I write from scratch, that's when my brain starts going, okay, actually, here's some fundamental flaws. I feel them in a different way. So for me, yeah, it takes as long as writing the first draft, but then it's all this extra time put in of actually identifying all the flawed parts and working on them and changing them. And sometimes it's a lot harder to come up with a solution to a problem that I created for myself in the first draft. Yeah, so like to whittle down of like, yeah, the writing process as a whole obviously is really, really long, but for me it's that second draft that is where like a huge amount of time goes into.
How many drafts would you say your game will go through before the players even see it?
I mean, I think people have seen every draft I have made, because the first time I ran a game, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. The mission for me for that first game was just do the thing. Just do it. Because if you get into your head and go, this isn't good enough, like, you can kind of get into the space of never thinking it's good enough. So there's nothing wrong with showing your first draft to people as part of the playtest, or even if it's not a playtest, even if you're just like, I'm just going to run this game, and then we're never going to go back. Yeah, so I would say players see every single draft, but it's the second run that is, I don't know, the one that feels a bit more special, I guess, and then the third or the fourth, everyone sees everything basically at some point, for me.
And yeah, in a lot of cases, the character sheets are never finished, because you're always going to be learning something. You're always going to be wanting to tweak things. This is good enough for this run. Okay, now that we've run it once, I need to fix these things. Now this is good enough for this run. And yeah.
Yeah, most of my games don't go through substantial changes when I pull them out to rerun them in general. I find typos and errors in the character sheet every time they rerun. I've got games that have run 10 or 12 times, and every time I find something else to correct in the character sheets.
Yep, can confirm. I've done the same.
But I don't even know that I have distinct drafts for a lot of games. Like, there is not, I don't get it to a particular completion point and say, like, this is good enough for now, and then maybe revise and make a second version. In my writing stages, one character sheet will have gone through a dozen revisions before I start working on another one at all. There is no one point in the process where I have a complete draft. All the components are at different stages until everything's done. So it's really hard for me to count drafts at all.
How do you determine the amount of player characters you want to include in a plot? And in addition, how many factions do you think works best?
I refuse to answer that on the knowledge I still don't know.
Highly story dependent is
Yeah.
what I find.
Some
There's
plots, yeah. Sorry.
Sorry.
Go
There's a
please.
number of different factors involved with that. And some of that comes down to how in-depth do you want character conversations to be, particularly when we're talking about story, we're talking about convention-based games which have these limited time frames. And if you shove 20 people into a room and expect them to talk for these are the rough calculations that you need to be doing for what is 100 under 180 minutes. The conversation length is going to be the potential for conversation length between people is going to be very different to if you say halve that number and have 10 people in a room, and what that looks like in terms of the conversations that you're going to have and the ability to have an in-depth conversation. So if the more complex kind of conversations you want out of a game, the fewer number of people but that you may want, or the tighter number of groups that you want, so less plot overlap. in terms of the general rule of thumb, when we're talking about plots, you generally need you need a minimum of 2 people, obviously, to be a plot, but you generally want maybe 3, because if you go with one's an ally and one's trying to upset it, there's a triangle of a story, and anything else is can be added and added into after that. But you generally want, somebody trying to support it, somebody trying to upset it in that kind of context. Yeah, I hope that helps a little bit.
What a bit of a broad question now. What would you say makes an interesting freeform character?
Oh, it's hard to. It would be hard to nominate any one thing. I have written characters I would not want to play, but I've written them because I know that other people want to play them. So it varies a lot. I think something important, something that I think a lot of freeform writers have talked about. Every character needs to be the central character in their own plot, their own story. It's not good enough for characters to just be a bit part in somebody else's, or a supporting character in someone else's story in a freeform.
So I learned this tip from a Farscape actor, but I think the origin was actually that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is the saying, to be interesting, be interested. And so it's about motive and your areas of interest, because you can have, so like an easy pitfall maybe that could come out of just thinking, oh, everyone's the main character. There's the reluctant hero. There's people, there are very, very important stories about people who are who maybe have more blocks to getting themselves out there. Those are really important stories. But it's really hard in the chaotic environment of a freeform for everybody to look out for that kind of character and to help draw them out of their shell. So those are harder characters to write as interesting. Not that their stories aren't interesting or valuable, just that you have to be really careful with them. So having people be interested enough in something that they overcome whatever desires they might have to stay in their shell. I think that's really critical.
I think, related to that is each character has to have a need to interact. Because while the loner character is great in concept, it's great to read about, it's not a good character in the game. Because if they don't have reason to interact, why are they here? So every character needs to have reasons to interact. So they need a reason to talk to people, because they're not going to talk to people. That information is not going to make its way out into the rest of the game, and you're then losing out the reason for the chaos to be happening. So always make sure everyone can interact and has reason to.
What would you say are some of the pitfalls to avoid when writing characters?
You're not telling a story, you're presenting a story and giving it to other people to tell. Because there were some games that I've played where it's fairly obvious by the end of it that the person who wrote it was trying to get us to act out the story they wanted to tell, and that wasn't a good game. That would probably be a good stage play, but that's not what we were trying to do. We were trying to play a game. So always make sure you've left enough space for the players to take it their way.
A writer who I respect very much once said to me that writing a freeform character is writing the first 3/4 of a story.
Yep.
And then you hand it to the player to write the last quarter.
Isolation and apathy are pitfalls. If a character is isolated, that is a very hard thing to play. If a character is apathetic about what is going on, that is not interesting to people. Yeah.
Yeah, make communication matter. Don't stick blocks in there that say you don't. If you're going to say this person is big and scary, say don't talk to them. You need that communication flow. So figuring out ways of keeping people able to converse in games with any other character is really kind of critical. There are always ways to break rules like this, but particularly when you're just starting to write these sorts of things, keep it simple, keep it open, keep the inquiry happening. As Rhydian says, interest. As Travis said, make sure that you're not finishing the story of the character in the character sheet. That is for the game. The game is where the story is finished, possibly, or climaxes, at least. That is the climax of the story, is the game that you're presenting. So making sure that you don't finish someone's story.
And on a technical aspect, information overload. It's useful to give people, obviously, tips, clues, prompts that they might not use, but you want the volume to be manageable in the space of the game. Yeah, because people don't have that much time to internalize an entire world. Yeah.
Don't give people too little either. I have played a lot of underbaked freeforms where there wasn't enough information in the game to sustain the play, and people just simply ran out of things to talk about, ran out of things to do very early on in the session. And you can give people a surprising amount of information and still have them take it in, but it needs to be structured. If you just give them an info dump, then they will lose most of it. It needs to be structured so that they can keep track of what they've learned from the character sheet, so they can look things up in a hurry and be reminded.
When it comes to writing a character, how do you incorporate or consider gender into that process? Rhydian, you look like you've got some thoughts.
Yeah, I think gender is really important. Like the first game that I ran, I wanted to make it not important. I wanted it to make it not matter. And all kinds of unexpected stories and assumptions emerged from having tried to write things that way. And that can be fun and fine, but it means that the assumptions are out of your control. And so that might send messages you don't want to be sent. So yeah, I do always consider gender, because even if the story is not about gender, it is going to risk saying something. In the same ways that, like, it's always important to consider other factors about the society and culture that we live in that players are going to bring in with them. How are they going to bring in those assumptions, and how is that going to impact people's experiences? As a gendered person and player, and as a gendered character, because there are some things that become very unfun depending on your position in society and this as an escapist play space. To think of like one example, I played a female character in a game who was a mother, and in a time period that was historical, medieval, in a court game. And I had a few character connections, and there was a lot of politics going on. One of my jobs was to matchmake my children and support my husband in the. And this is not a bad or uninteresting story, but throughout the course of the game, when I was trying to engage with the game, I encountered a number of blocks, and the one that hurt the most probably was going up to a male player who was playing a female character and trying to get information about the political game. And this player saying to me, "Oh, I wouldn't know anything about politics. I'm just the wife." That was a really tough experience in the game, because it meant that thanks to people leaning into these genders in these ways, I was completely locked out. So I had, as a player who has experienced misogyny in my life, I had the experience of encountering that misogyny in a game in a way that prevented me from accessing the game, in a way that made me feel like people weren't interested in my character, or they were not treating my character as an equal human being. That this character was relegated to this role of they only exist as a mother and a servant to people, and they're not there. Her inner rich world was not important to the game or to anyone else in the game. Playing that as somebody who has encountered those attitudes in the real world is tough. So yeah, it's really important to remember those possibilities when writing. So that's the warning. And I want to add, Geneva's added in the chat, note that everything I'm saying right now applies to race too, which is really important. But yeah, there's also other ways in which you can make this fun by subverting expectations, or, considering the stories that are not being told. Anyway, yes, I'll let others speak now.
I've noticed that, like, I'm sure we all have noticed that gender is changing in our society. And as I said earlier, it's been a while since I've written a freeform. The way we regard gender has changed significantly in that time. I would probably take some different approaches now because I'm writing for a different society. When I wrote a game 20 years ago, I was writing for the society of that time. And a lot of the gender expectations written into those games were those of the society that they were in. Not necessarily ignorantly or accidentally. I've written quite a few games that comment on our gendered expectations in our society. So it's often there deliberately. But if I was to write today, I'd have to write something different because society is changing.
Yeah, I'm discovering a similar sort of thing when I'm rerunning some of my older games. They were written when they were written. They're not quite as appropriate nowadays because things have changed, and I've had to put warnings into them because this was written 20 years ago. Things have changed. Please be aware of that as we play.
And I find myself wanting to look to writers like Rhydian these days who have a better understanding than I do of where gender is sitting today and how these changes are affecting people. Sophie, go.
Also, the scene in which you are writing has changed. So the participants, the people that are playing the games, have changed a lot as well. You have the traditional convention space, gender balance of 20 years ago versus what it is today and where it's going to be tomorrow. So that's another consideration that we are putting forward when we're writing these games. You know, I've played around with games where there's where I have not determined I've not predetermined the gender of any particular character, and had some fantastic outcomes and some really interesting stories told in that space. I also do a lot of writing in a swashbuckling setting where the gender tropes are often they're either very gendered, or they can be the use of gender for hiding who you really are. That's a very major trope as well. So it really does depend on the worlds that you're setting your game in as well. What the story is. Is the story something that is useful to make a social commentary about a gender at a particular time and place? And how do you make that interesting for the characters and that are going to maybe not have such a great time in that commentary, in that game space? What do you make? What do you add? Give? How do you subvert in those spaces? Is a really big question. How do you make it an interesting story to play with those genders? I think one of the things that I will be doing if I'm running Min Min again, which is set in 1964 Australia, is that I will hand more male players the female characters in that game.
As someone who played one of the female characters in that game, yes, that is. I learnt a lot.
Yeah. Because if we're using games as a play and as a learning tool, that's a really useful way for people to see and experience what some of those things, and particularly some of that information, some of that experience that Rhydian was having, showing that this is not an uncommon situation, and that we need to be more aware of it as a society.
Mm. And if you don't want the game to be social commentary, you still have to consider gender, because fantasies, power fantasies, escapist fantasies are gendered. How men, how women, how trans people write power fantasies and escapist fantasies are all different.
Oh, yes.
So it's about making a conscious choice. If you're making an escapist or power fantasy, whose power fantasy, whose escapist fantasy do you want to be writing?
So, say you've gotten all the character sheets written to a point where you're pretty sure a game is ready to playtest. How do you go about playtesting your games? What does it look like? Do you have a particular process? What do you do to playtest the games?
Playtesting freeforms is hard because you need more people. And it's very hard to playtest a game when the people you could get to playtest are the ones who are going to want to play it at the convention. So most of my games have hit convention without playtesting because I couldn't come up with a good way of doing it.
Same for some of mine. Occasionally we've done playtest. Actually, Vanham and I wrote a game together once, and we playtested that. Might be the only one that Random did playtest. So it sometimes happens especially if it's a smaller freeform. Sometimes you have to substitute other techniques. Some writers use test readers, for example. They'll give character sheets to groups of players outside of the convention scene who will read through them and gather feedback without actually playing the game.
Well, this is a logistical challenge, right? Because yeah, if you want a playtest that isn't just running it at the con, it's about how are you getting space to run it? How much capacity does that space have? You know, if you're just trying to playtest something in your living room, you might be only playtesting a small portion of the game. What's the audience you're getting to playtest? Are you drawing from the community that you're going to be running the game for, or do you ask outside of it, either through personal connections or through other connected communities? I do think there's a lot of potential there, but then there's also maybe difficulty in that, because if you're getting people who haven't played a freeform before and that's their first experience of one, they might have a limited ability to actually spot common mistakes. Or, you know, they're processing both the first experience of a freeform that they've ever had at the same time as trying to critically analyze it. That's a tough gig. Yeah, so thinking about whose perspective is going to be useful for you in producing a good game.
Yeah, I have been very lucky and have been able to playtest a number of games. And believe me, they've needed it. But yeah, that's a very lucky circumstance, and has to do with the fact that we have multiple communities to draw from. And yeah, the convention scene people, but or people that had been in a convention scene and were no longer, that I still remain friends with, that you can drag in to do things. Playtesting is, yeah, one aspect. Proofreading, getting people to read through is absolutely critical as well. And yeah, yes, that is both of these things. If you can do them, fantastic. But the logistic problems are huge. It's very, very difficult with convention freeforms to actually play test them. Again, that's one of the reasons why some of these things get run at multiple conventions over multiple years, and they hopefully, yeah, get better each time, because you've gone back and gone, what was the feedback again? As a writer. So and going back and rereading your work after you've finished it also helps, if you are going to run stuff again, going through doing those changes, picking up the spelling errors or the missing words, or any of those sorts of things that you maybe don't want. You know, one of the benefits of having Caligo as a group is that we have a group of dedicated of people who are predisposed to come along and join in and be part of a playtest for these sorts of things, because most of them will understand what they're getting into. They have some experience, you know, most of you have some experience of what it is you're doing, what you've done, and can provide that context, contextual feedback, and analysis.
I will also spook the club and saying you will also receive support with venue hire and insurance, which are things you don't need to worry about in a convention, but yes, that's pretty handy stuff to have.
Yeah, can confirm. Caligo helped me run a playtest like a week ago, so that was very helpful. When it comes to designing your character sheets, Travis, you mentioned that you don't want it to just be an info dump. How do you go about making the character sheets readable and accessible to the players when they're seeing that they're playing a character for the first time? They've got about 10 minutes of reading and then game on.
I'm not to be the first one to jump in, but okay, I will be the first one to jump in. Headers, white space, sections. It needs to be structured and searchable visually. People keep telling me that, well, many writers over the years have told me that they're worried about their character sheets getting too long, and they keep trying to cut down the info because they're worried that the players won't be able to read them. Possibly my most successful character sheets have been 4 pages long consistently. Every character in the game, 4 pages exactly. But they're structured. The first 2 pages is the character's own story, and it's printed double-sided, so it's 1 sheet of paper, 2 pages. The 3rd and the 4th page are what they know about other characters. A little section devoted to each other character in the game. Again, printed double-sided, 1 sheet of paper. So if someone's about to engage someone else in a conversation and they need a reminder of what they have to talk to this person about, they know which piece of paper to pull out of their pocket to start with. And they can scan down the list. It's in alphabetical order. If they know the name, they can quickly find the relevant person, and they can read the 1 to 2 paragraphs on that person within about 30 seconds. Okay, so it's all about structure, and the same goes for the stuff that's about their own story. It is not 2 pages of just free text. It is broken down into their important plots. If they want to know where they were when the murder occurred, if it's a murder mystery, for example, then there is a section devoted to the murder, and it's got a heading that says the murder. So all your clues that are directly related to that, you think, are in that section. Each subplot that you're working with has its own section.
I'm finding nowadays as well, I'm highlighting other characters' names in the text. So that way, if you know there was some mention of John did something, there's John's name highlighted in bold, so I can easily find it in the text. That way, it makes it easier for you to go back to the bits you need, because this character will remember that. I don't remember that because I've only just became this character half an hour ago.
All right.
Rhydian? I don't think it's been said, and somebody should at least say it, is consider design. Just for posterity, we've got to recognize graphic design can do a lot. Not just bolding, yes, but also, yes, your use of columns, your use of boxes. Please do not, if you're going to stand by the rule of no more than like 1 A4 double-sided sheet for a character, which I do like that as a rule, don't cram all your text right to the edge of possible printing space. Leaving space for your eyes to roam the page and pick up bits that stand out. So consider text as a visual format. It's not just thoughts. It is poets think of this as well. Poetry on page is a visual medium, not just a auditory style one. So think of how it looks.
I'm also going to jump in here and go, remember, we are not all graphic artists, and we are going to make mistakes, and we are going to put things out badly. That should not stop you. Do the thing. I'm not a graphic designer. I am shit at that kind of stuff. People have read my character sheets. Do the thing. I keep character sheets. I have a lot of examples of really good ones. I have a lot of examples of some really bad ones. And yeah, it's really interesting to see. Good design is really useful and important, but so some days you just got to you just go with what you have, because we're just working in basic word processing and formatting is hard.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll add with regards to space is your players are probably going to be wanting to write notes as we go. So leaving some space around the character description so they can write notes. Oh, I spoke with this guy about this thing, etc., etc. That is something they're going to find useful.
Mm.
And in one game, I actually provided an extra sheet which had all the character names with spaces against them. So if someone wanted to write notes, here, have an extra sheet of paper that you can write all those notes on top of everything else.
Hey, that's cute.
I often provide highlighters at the session.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So that people can go through the character sheet and highlight the bits that stand out to them, the bits that they want to remember and want to be able to find quickly.
So we get to the day, we've done all the playtesting, we've done all the writing. It's now the day of the actual freeform. What's important to remember on the day?
No matter how much you panic, it'll go fine. Because despite the fact I've been doing this now for almost 30 years, I still panic. It is automatic. It's going to happen. I'll survive. Make sure you've got yourself, your brain collected before you start, because it is very hard to get the players settled if you're not. Make sure you understand what you need to do to get it started. If there are things that need to happen at the start of the game, write yourself a list. Okay,
Drink
in my
water.
opening blurb, I need to mention this, this, and this. I need to give this to this player for this reason. I need to do this for this player. I need to do these things. Here is my run sheet for the 5 minutes before the game actually starts. Make sure you're hydrated.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
always a good one.
Yeah, have and someone to be your sanity check is nice to have.
No matter how good you think you're going to be at running this, having someone else there is always going to be helpful. Even to just handle some of the small physical logistical stuff that you don't need specialist game knowledge, they can handle those sort of things, so you can do the stuff that only you can do.
And trust your players, because they're awesome and they're what make it work. Yeah.
They want this to work as much as you do. So they're not the enemy. You do have to remember that. They're not the enemy. They are probably going to destroy things, but that's part of the process. That's why they're there. Given them the first part of the story, let them run their own story and see how badly things explode.
Eat and know your space.
So we're freeforms all happened. It's been about 2 hours. You're wrapping things up. There's that last 15-minute rush as everyone tries to wrap up their plots at the very end, and the game ends. Usually around this time, there's time to debrief, discuss the game, and go around and highlight what people did. How do you tend to structure these? What do you find works? What do you find doesn't work?
Depends on the game, depends on the number of players, depends on how complicated the plots are. A lot of times I will just have everyone sitting around in a circle and give each person a minute to give us a brief description of who you were, what were your secrets, what were your plots. But the most recent one I ran up at Phenomenon I didn't do that because there were 27 characters. There were a lot of plots. It was very complicated. What I did was I pointed out what each of the character was, what their plots were, and then gave, if there were things that I remembered that the character needed to achieve, I asked the player, did you achieve this? How did this go? I guided a lot more because 27 players at 1 minute each, that's 27 minutes on their own. And the vast majority of players are going to want to go over time because players are enthusiastic. So in that game, I restrained them a lot more because of that. In some of the smaller games, yeah, give each person a couple of minutes to talk about what they were doing, an anecdote, that's fine. Bigger games, you can't do that.
Agreed with the bigger games. Choosing, like being very choosy about it's actually not anecdote time, it's secret reveal time for the stuff that not everyone got to hear. You know, so like you, when building the game, you will have an idea of like some of your major plot threads. You are not seeking out individual players, you are seeking those major plot threads to go, what happened to that? What happened to this? Yeah. And giving people a chance to be like, oh, actually, this was magical. Or yeah.
Yeah, managing it, managing that end can be really, really tricky when you get people running off and going, and in the future I do this. No, and somebody goes, but no, you don't, because I did this. The game has ended. It's all off screen. That's for later. Let's focus on what happened during the play space, during the playtime. Make sure that you, yeah, if you are giving a minute, that you are that players are aware that you are timing that minute, or at least pseudo timing that minute, and making sure that you know, if you are going around in the circle, that everyone gets that opportunity to have a little bit of a chat. Sometimes it's also useful to mention, you know, particularly in games that have heavier themes, that you can go, okay, this you can do that re-acknowledgement of, okay, so there's some tough themes in here. Really, you know, make sure that you're checking in with those players that were involved in that, so that they know that they're being supported through what could be a potentially emotional moment for them, and know that later on they might also be able to they might also want to talk to you about what it was that happened to them, or they felt, or they experienced during a game. So it's, yeah, debrief is one thing. There's also these other bits that might happen later. You're not a therapist, you're a game writer.
And this, I want to actually note what Josie has added in the chat.
Exactly what I was going to ask. So
yeah, so Josie says, this wrap-up thing is tradition, but what is its actual purpose? I've never really understood it. And the purpose is totally relevant to when you're being choosy about like what it is you're using the debrief for. Know that purpose. So the main one being, it's putting people back out of the character heads and into their own heads. So if a game just ends and then you just leave, it's that thing of, oh, like you haven't had a chance to talk with the other people in the game and go, huh, that just happened. But, you know, just doing that, it puts people back in their own headspace, and gets them to start packing up the experience instead of identifying with the character, seeing it as a thing that they can now analyze and have opinions on, right? So it's recentering, and it is an opportunity to take care of people who might have had a tough experience, as Fee alluded to. Thinking about a really emotionally challenging game that we had earlier this year. There were players who played some really, really tough characters, and identifying, hey, you did a great job in that role that required you to confront some really awful things and to feel awful so that other people could have a good story. you know, you gotta, that it's an opportunity to take care of people in that process, because otherwise they're just walking back out into that world with this really, really awful feeling, going, why did I do that? Like, what, you know, I just made myself feel terrible for 3 to 4 hours. Did that actually benefit anybody? You need to be able to say, yeah, actually, that was really valuable. Thank you for your generosity. And sometimes there'll be things, really tough things, bad things maybe, that will happen in a game. And if somebody doesn't say, hey, everybody, that was a little fucked up, but we did that so that we could learn from it. Yeah, sometimes you've got to name that stuff. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Fee.
No, I was cutting you off. It's also, again, positioning from a convention scene where in 20 minutes time, after you've defrocked or grabbed a bite to eat, potentially, hopefully, you're running into another game with another character, and you're doing this whole whiplash thing again, over 3 days, 4 days, whatever that convention might be. You're changing character every three or so hours in those spaces. So being able to do that chat down, debrief immediately, you'll do it later, or you keep doing it, is an important first step.
And I want to pick up again, John in the chat has mentioned having non-productive sessions of this, but yeah, it's really, you may not be a therapist, but you are a moderator, and your moderator skills are continuing into this from the game. And yeah, one of those moderation duties is identifying if a player is starting to debrief in a way that will negatively affect others, and actually cut them off. Like, have in your mind, like, if somebody starts going like, oh, you know, like I loved like how I got to beat down your character and I was right and you were wrong. That kind of stuff can really ruffle feathers. So please remember, you continue to be a moderator through the debrief process. Yeah, and make sure that people don't, you're not giving room for people to suck up oxygen and make others feel worse about their play experience.
I want to add something here that might be a little bit at odds with some things that some others have said. In a freeform, you've got a lot of different plots going on all at once. Okay, and nobody really knows what's gone on with all of those stories. So for me, one of the important things about a debrief in some games is to put a proper conclusion on some of those stories. The story of some characters will be affected by something that happened 5 minutes before the end of the game in a conversation between two other characters. If you don't have the debrief, you never find out about that. You never get the conclusion of those stories. So doing a debrief lets me name the results of everything that people have done. It might not be important to everyone, but at least sometimes it's important to me, and it has been important to me as a player to find out whether my plans have come to fruition or not, and what happened to my character after that. And possibly for some of us, that's a part of what helps us transition from being the character for 2.5 hours to being our regular selves and then transitioning into a new character in an hour's time. So I often think that it's important to ask what happened so that we know what happened with some of those stories, and it does vary by game. I mentioned the game about homeless people before. The important thing about that is to find out which of those characters actually survived the night, because that's what the game's about. And I've got another game that that there's, I think, 3 different stories that what happens in the game will produce, will change things for that character when they leave the box. We mentioned the box earlier. They will leave the box, and what happens produces an outcome. And it's only some characters, but I want to know what that outcome is. So I do a specific little epilogue for each during debrief. And again, it has to be kept really quick. It has to be done in a minute, maybe 2 minutes for that sort of thing, because there's only a couple of them in the game.
If there was one piece of advice you could give to a first-time freeform writer, what would that be?
Try it.
Get a mentor.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's you're excited, you want to have control over your vision and all of that. The right mentor will not control your vision; they will facilitate it. You don't even need them to be your assistant GM, but it is really handy. But getting them to look at your character sheets, getting them to look at the back end of your design, a mentor who you trust, who can tell you about the history of other games that have happened before yours.
Yeah, why what you're about to do did not work last time. If you can score an experienced person to co-write the game with you, that is fantastic. If you are an experienced writer and you are deciding to write a new game, I would encourage you to find a much less experienced writer to co-write with you, because you get some really valuable insight out of people who have not been doing the same thing for 20 years. It's really valuable to be working with people who have very different experiences in this art to what we do.
Pete, do you have a bit of insight?
I mean, they've mostly been covered, but yeah, talking with people, understand, communication. This is a practice that is based in communication, both verbal and written, and understanding how to pitch, what sort of pitch you're doing, understanding the history of the games that have come before, all of these things, having that mentor, having someone that you trust to talk through things, absolutely, yeah, critical. I wouldn't be where I am doing, without someone else's help as well. So I think we've all been through those processes of talking with people who have done this before, and improve. What we're here to do is improve or change up or create different stories in different ways. If we're not here to do different things, then we're stagnating, and there's no point in carrying on. We're just rehashing things. We got to look at it. We move with society. We are part of a subculture that is gaining in popularity. So let's leverage that, leverage the people out here who know how to do the things in different ways.
Awesome. So thanks to everyone in the panel. I'll just do a quick outro and then we'll have about 15 minutes or so for the Q&A. So if you found this workshop inspiring and you're keen to get writing, the Caligo Mundi Discord, which you're in, has an incubator forum and an incubator channel, which is a perfect place for you to pitch an idea. If you've got something that you've got in mind, that's a great way to find a potential mentor or to find co-writers. As has been touched on by this panel, LARP is a social and community-driven medium. Having a co-writer is super helpful. Having someone just there to be a co-GM is very helpful, and Caligo is more than happy to find you a venue, find you co-writers, give you advice. So definitely take advantage of that. If you're looking for a place to run a freeform, there are a couple of conventions that happen on the east coast of Australia that are pretty big. So the one that's coming up most recently is Conquest. Got a mug right here from the most recent one. That takes place over the Easter weekend every year. It's perfect venue for freeforms. Game submissions are currently open. It's got decades of history of freeforms beforehand, and believe submissions will close probably sometime early next year. So if you've got an idea that you're really keen to get writing and get started, that one's something to look at. There's also Phenomenon in Canberra, which is another great convention. Usually happens late September, early October, around the Labor Day weekend in ACT. Submissions for games for that one will likely open next year. Apparently, according to Lisa, who is one of the orgs behind Conquest, most of those on screen right now have submitted something for Conquest 2026. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, those are the big conventions that I know of that have a lot of freeforms. And if you want to play in a freeform before you start writing, definitely the place to jump in to get a feel for it. All right, we're going to jump into the Q&A section. Going to have a hard cutoff at 4 o'clock so that we can let our delightful panel go eat dinner and drink water and be free. So I'm just going to quickly jump into one of the questions that was mentioned earlier. What have you learned from your failures?
Listen to advice. Early on, I was really bad at listening to advice because my brain interpreted it as criticism. I've managed to change that to now listen to advice as, this person said they had a problem. Whether you believe from your side of it not was a problem, that's irrelevant. They saw a problem, therefore there was a problem. So listen to advice and pay attention to why there was a problem. We mentioned various rules for various things. The rules themselves aren't actually that important. The reason those rules are there is because someone saw a problem in the past and decided to implement this rule to try and fix the problem. If you want to get rid of that rule, pay attention to why that rule was there and make sure you've got something to handle the problem it was trying to fix.
I think thinking about failures, honestly, some of those really just teach you the basics. It's like no matter how much you try to get your head around it, when you jump into it, you're probably going to make some really fundamental errors, and players will hit those walls. There's nothing wrong with that. Think of some of those actually as the fact that you need to practice this thing in order to get better at it, and you need feedback, and you need to be good at taking that feedback. And some of it might be tough, and it is entirely possible to handle that feedback badly. And anyway, yeah, it's an important process to learn just as much as the game is. Learning to not have your ego tied in with the game being perfect. The thing to be proud of is that you did it. It is going to have problems. Treat people telling you about those problems as people who are doing you a favor.
Listen to the person who is second most critical about your game. I have found over the years that you will often have someone coming out of a game saying that was absolutely terrible, and complaining bitterly about their experience. And I've found that a lot of the time, the player who is that critical about it, they brought their bad experience on themselves. I'm not just talking about my games, I've seen this with other games that I've played. the person who has had the second worst time playing your game, they're often a more accurate indicator of a more substantial problem with your game. Listen carefully to the player who is second most critical of your game. If you have 20 players in a game and 19 had a fantastic time and one did not, one had a really bad game, well, yeah. Listen to them. Look for structural issues, things that you've done wrong that might have brought them to have a bad game. Definitely check out their feedback. But remember that the experience is also dependent on what a player brings into the game. So they may have brought the wrong thing into that game. So try not to let that hurt you too badly.
Yeah. On that note, a lot of times the person who had the worst time in your game, the problem with that was this game was not for them. And you're not going to know that until they try. There are some players that I know that don't do well in certain types of my games, not because there's anything wrong. It's just because the way this player plays, they're not suitable for this type of game. And that's fine.
Learning to identify that really helps with advertising.
Yes.
And how you advertise your game. So you can learn a lot about how to advertise your game better and how to communicate your game better by figuring out who is the ideal type of player for your game.
How do you get past the idea that an idea isn't good enough? Or how do you get out of that getting stuck in your own head? And yeah, what do you do to make sure you're pushing through and getting that game into a playtest or onto a convention?
You have to remember that you're not the final judge of whether the game was good. The players are. And the players are not going to be able to tell you that if they don't play. As someone who's been writing these games now for almost 30 years, I have doubts every single time. But I write them anyway, I get a product, and the vast majority of times that product works. So no matter how bad you think you are, you're not. You've got to put the effort in to make it to the players.
Really haven't had much in the way of in the freeform space of games that just did not work at all. Ones that were complete failures. There has been varying quality, but I'm not sure that there was one that I say I regret running that.
Dev has a good addition in chat. Be afraid, but do it anyway. It's and which I agree with. There's no other way but to rip off the Band-Aid sometimes. It's very, very easy to avoid bad feelings. You kind of just have to have the bad feelings and keep doing it. Having a mentor or a buddy who is your sanity check to be the person who is saying, it's done enough. Just get it, just do it, just book it in. Just give them the character sheets. Having somebody who can tell you to stop fussing over it and just do it is really helpful. Or I found really helpful.
Are there any consistent player archetypes that you feel like you need to include in a game?
Archetypes are usually genre dependent. Now that doesn't mean you can't swap archetypes around, but archetypes are really useful starting points for characters when you're writing. They give something that is easy to understand, easy to pick up, and easy to run with for whoever as a player gets them. So do not underestimate the power of the archetype, and definitely go with them. I think in this day and age, we are getting better at avoiding particular archetypes that more problematic in media, in general media as well, and in life. So yeah, and that's where having a buddy to come in and say, hey, that's that archetype, you might want to boot the battered woman archetype out the window. That's not a fun thing to play. So yeah, having that sanity check, but use archetypes where you can.
One of the things you'll get as you get more experience in this is you'll start to know your players better, and you'll know which players are better for which types of characters. Because there are some people who I know from running many, many games before, not to give them certain characters because they're not going to do well at that. Some people are problem solvers. Some people are social people. Some people are various types of things. If they want to try something new, that's fine. But if they're asking, hey, what would you advise? These are the types of characters that I know you will play well and enjoy. So that's an advantage you get from having been in this for a while.
If someone's an uncomfortable match for you as a game runner, whether it's an ideological mismatch or you've got a bad history or past history with a player, but they're not acting in bad faith, is there a protocol for saying no?
You can say no. This is something you have built. You may want to talk to if it's at a convention, you may want to talk to the convention organizers to make sure they're going to support you in that. But I have told players, I don't think you're a suitable person for this game before.
Yeah, there's the polite, like, you can just say, I picked somebody else to assist me, like, sorry, like, you got in slower. I'm noting random, I think this person is asking specifically about maybe co-GMs. Yeah, and when you say no, if you do have to just say no thank you, be really careful about, like, maybe you don't need to give a reason why. You're allowed to just say no. Sometimes if you give more details, people take that as a problem to solve. Like, oh, you told me that I'm not good at this type of game. Well, maybe I'll work on it and I'll come back later and say, actually, like, I've worked on this now. I'm good at this now. Yeah, no is a complete sentence. Thank you, Ben. Yeah. That doesn't just save you from accidentally saying something you might regret. It saves them and their ego from feedback that might not be useful for them.
What are the pros and cons of using an established setting, IP, or canon for a freeform?
You already have a large body of work to work with. Walking into a room and being told this is Star Trek, cool. There's a lot of work I don't have to do there. But by the same token, that defines a different box that you have to work within. So it is more freeing in that you have to do less work, but more restrictive in that you now need to work within those bounds. Both sides, working with existing IP and working with your own stuff, are both very, very good. I've done both.
The existing IP, if it is a popular one, like Vampire, The Masquerade, World of Darkness stuff, like some Star Trek things, it will have particular baggage from the players.
Yeah.
That can get brought in and utilized as, I'm not going to say basically players will come in with their own expectations, and if that's not your product, then that can cause those points of friction between what you're trying to present as a writer of a scenario of a game. And this happens a lot, versus trying to get people to buy into your own worlds that you've made up, your own story world, your own process. So that's one of the biggest pros and cons that that I've seen. So if you are planning to write something in an existing IP, just be really aware of what the fan base is likely to react to. And don't take a lot of that personally, because that's it's your creative endeavor, not theirs.
Just going to jump in here with one more question. How do you feel after a successful freeform session that you wrote? What are some of the good feelings for people who might be thinking about running one?
I'm going to go back to my very, very first freeform, which I ran in 1998. It was a 13-player freeform. I had 12 absolutely excellent players and one really good one. I walked out of there floating on air and complaining that I've just used every single good role player Brisbane had, which meant Travis suggested you could take that down to one of the Melbourne conventions, which is why I then ran that convention in Melbourne at Conquest 2000. And I've been chasing that high ever since. It is fantastic to come up with this idea. You present it to the players and you went where with that? I wasn't expecting that. Oh, that's awesome. That's why I do this. I do this because I come out going, oh my God, I need to do that again.
Yeah, it's really, this is a social art form. This is an art form that you get to share with people, and that's a real privilege. I think about, like, as somebody who enjoys doing art in other art forms, the reason why I sacrifice time that I might put into other art forms and put it into this one is because of the fact that you get to share it with a community who will value your labor. And it feels really good listening to people talking about your art later, and saying thank you for running, and having stories and having experiences, and knowing that this is an experience that they will always have. This is you, like, for me, I'm like, every time I run a game, I feel these are memories in life I'm helping create. And these are relationships I'm building with this community, and those have an inherent reward to me. And I could paint paintings, and maybe one or two people will like it, and that's fine. They'll appreciate it for a moment, they'll move on. But these stories feel like they build on each other, and it's really beautiful. And it's such a beautiful privilege when you're anxious about something to hand it over to other people and see the really good stories that they do, and go, wow, like you get to learn how people have fun. People who think totally differently to you. You get to see them have fun, and they'll do it in ways you didn't expect. And from that, you can learn how to have more fun for yourself. Like, there's so much endless reward in that.
Yeah, I still have people anecdoting about games I ran 20 years ago. So yeah, that feeling you can't. It is fantastic.
Fee, how do you feel after a successful?
You don't want to know.
We have to scrape her up off the floor.
Yeah, usually. Yeah. I have said this often. I am actually the worst judge of how my games go. And so yeah, I will hide away in a corner. And yeah, that's how I deal with it. Yeah. It's tough.
But Fee, as somebody who experiences this post-game hangover, emotional hangover, what makes you want to keep doing it, even though it feels bad?
That's a really good question. I'm a masochist. I don't know. Let's see. Wow, that is a really good question. Sorry. Perhaps
Have a story you feel like you need to tell.
Yeah. I think that's there's stories. I'm addicted to storytelling. I think. And that sits there. Regardless of anything else, it's an addiction to storytelling. And providing platforms for voices that are not necessarily heard in our society, in our community a lot. You know, we as a community are a very white bread, middle class Australia slice, and there are stories out there to tell that aren't that.
Ooh, and to build on that, if that's okay,
Go.
a thing that I often tell people about what I love about LARP that gets a lot of people who've never tried it going, oh, actually, that makes me want to do it, is that thing of getting to tell stories that you're not seeing on screen. Like, let's explicitly acknowledge Australian TV and film and TV does not tell the stories of our everyday lives. It does not tell working class commentary. It does not reflect a lot of people I know. So getting to see yourself mirrored and talked about and heard in a way that mainstream media is not going to do. You know, we're getting to build culture here that our culture has failed to do for us. And that is a tool set that lets us respond to the things we want to heal. Again, you're not a therapist, but when I talk like cultural healing, you know, addressing the wrongs of the past, you know, there's things that could be said.
To address them, you have to understand them, and to understand them, you have to explore them.
Also, with this art form that we do, even if the stories are being told in the mainstream media, a lot of the time we get to tell those stories or experience those stories from a different perspective. We get to look at the story from inside the character instead of outside the character, which is what you usually get when you're watching TV. You're often looking in from outside, and these stories put us inside the characters and inside their stories.
Awesome. So we've gone 5 minutes over time, so I'm going to cut it off here. But I'd like to thank everyone on the panel for such a enlightening, sharing of wisdom. If you would like to continue the conversation, because I'm sure dozens of you have ideas bubbling away, jump the idea incubator channel on the Discord is the perfect place. If you've just got a question, or if you've got a thought, feel free to chuck it in there. Caligo Mundi has so many GMs who have been doing this for decades. They've seen the games that have done well and what have not done well, so they can give you all kinds of advice. But yeah, thank you once again to everyone who has listened and who has shared their experiences. It's really heartening to see so many people jumping on to this, and I'm excited to see what games will happen in 2026 and 2027 that might, come from new writers.
Will, you're happy to see more games that you can play.
That's all part of my grand scheme, yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
your
yes.
machination plan. And thank you very much to Will for organising this through the organisation as well. So, yeah, it's really lovely that you thought to do this, Will. I appreciate
Thank you very much.
your effort.